Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. We have an article today, folks, from July 11th of 2019, and it's an article that goes into the psychology a little bit of what was occurring with Jeffrey Epstein and his core four. Now, we've touched on this a little bit here on the podcast previously, and I let you know that I'm not qualified to delve into it, right? So there's a psychologist in this article who is going to talk a little bit more about the psychology aspect when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein and the core four. So I thought that this would be a good add to the catalog, considering I am not qualified to speak on the psychological aspect of this, not in the least. I certainly don't know anything about the study of psychology besides what I learned in my Psych 101 class in college. So I've always, shied away from that. I never jump into those sort of topics because I don't have a good handle on it. So I'm not going to, hop on the podcast and fake the funk and act like I know about psychology when I don't. But with this article, I think that this is going to be a good addition to the catalog because we'll hear from a psychologist here. And, obviously this person is qualified to talk about the psychology of the situation. Now, is this psychologist that, was working on the inside or with Jeffrey Epstein? No, not at all. This is somebody who's giving their opinion from the outside looking in. But I think it's, a good addition hearing from an actual psychologist when we talk about certain things on the podcast previously, like Stockholm Syndrome, et cetera, et cetera. Those are things that obviously we all understand what they are, and the fact that, a lot of people who are in situations such as the girls who were abused by Epstein end up with Stockholm Syndrome, right? But it's a topic, psychology in general, that I'm not very well versed in. So I have never gotten into the weeds there, right? We've never really gotten down into the weeds and discussed the psychological aspect of this case. So we're going to add this article to the catalog today, and we'll see what this psychologist has to say about it. This article is from Fox News. It was published on July 11th, and the author is Perry Chiaramonti. What motivated four women to allegedly assist disgraced multimillionaire pedophile Jeffrey Epstein in his abuse of dozens of underage girls? The answer may consist of three possible scenarios, according to a prominent New York City psychiatrist. So, again, this is somebody who is on the outside looking in, not somebody who, was working the case per se. They weren't hired by Epstein or hired by the lawyers for the girls, anything like that. This is just a New York City psychiatrist who is looking at the facts that are available and giving their opinion on what they believe occurred as far as the psychology aspect, right? The psychological aspect. Dr. Alan Manovitz, a Manhattan-based psychiatrist, stresses that it's difficult to determine what their motivations may have been in allegedly assisting Epstein. Yeah, for sure. Look, nobody's in their head, nobody's in their brains, nobody knows why they did what they did, why they would choose to help Jeffrey Epstein. Obviously, we know that there were carrots dangled. We know that there was money, prestige, great haircuts at top-end salons, food at top-end restaurants whenever you wanted it, $200,000 salaries. So we know all of that, right? Those are definitely motivators. But from a psychological aspect, from the way the brain works, who knows what made these ladies tick? Who knows why they thought it would be a good idea to assist Jeffrey Epstein? It's complicated to understand whether they did it voluntarily or were controlled, a la Patty Hearst, Manovitz said. And look, I agree to a certain extent that Jeffrey Epstein was certainly a cult leader, and he had these people wrapped around his finger. But at the end of the day, does that really matter? Did it matter that Manson was a cult leader and supposedly he told his followers to kill people? Of course it didn't. Manson still got charged and went up for the crime. Right? And so did the people who committed the crimes. So, you can say that you're controlled or whatever it may be, but at the end of the day, you need to have some personal responsibility for your actions. And we've lost that in America for sure. People aren't responsible for their own actions anymore. It's always blame somebody else, always passing the buck. And I'm pretty tired of it, to be honest with you. There are different psychological pathways to explain inexplicable behavior, he said. One is the alleged accomplices might simply be sociopaths by nature. Another is more complex, according to Manovitz. And I would say that all of these gals have, at the very least, some sociopathic tendencies, right? To hang out with Epstein for as long as they did, and to be involved with Epstein for as long as they were involved with him, there has to be a bit of sociopathic tendencies there, right? Besides, again, I'll always say with the exception of Nadia Marcinkova, because she was purchased as a child, right? If anyone can use the excuse of Stockholm Syndrome or mental abuse, it's Nadia Marcinkova. The other three, I'm sorry, but I'm not buying that with the other three. For most of us, the fear of punishment prevents us from committing crimes, but how many of us would do it if we knew we could get away with it, he said. Actually, not that many. However, there are some who learn strategies to neutralize their moral compass, and it is these people who may pose risks in society later in life. So, definitely Jeffrey Epstein's one of those people, in my opinion, right? He never had a moral compass his whole life. He was born effed up. He was born a monster. These weren't tendencies that were learned. These were tendencies that they were inside of him. Okay? This is the kind of person he was. He was evil incarnate, this man. And it wasn't something that he built going along. It was something that he nurtured going along, right? These feelings inside of him, these disgusting urges and these drives. For example, moral disengagement, the process of convincing oneself that ethical standards do not apply in some contexts, allow us to rationalize criminal acts or those that harm others, he adds. And we see that with Jeffrey Epstein, for sure, and we see it with Ghislaine Maxwell. They completely had themselves detached from reality. They thought that they were living in their own world, a world of their own creation, where they could get away with whatever they wanted and commit crimes against whoever they wanted with no repercussions. And they were allowed to do so for decades. So it fed into their beliefs, right? It fed into their mental illness, that they were above the law, that they were special, that they should garner special treatment. In reality, we know that these people were just sick and mentally ill. A third pathway can be the psychology of Stockholm Syndrome, which occurs when hostages or victims develop a psychological bond with their captors. It refers to a 1973 bank robbery in Stockholm in which hostages were taken. And this is something that I definitely, for sure, think applies to Nadia Marcinkova. Stockholm Syndrome is definitely a real thing, and it can be crippling. We've seen it time and time again with survivors of this sort of situation or kidnapping, etc., etc. So we definitely know that Stockholm Syndrome is a thing. And for me, the only person it could apply to in this situation is, again, Nadia Marcinkova. The other three aren't going to get that shield from me. They're not going to get that bit of slack from me, because they knew what they were doing. They weren't purchased as children. They weren't brought over here and groomed from childhood. So, miss me with all of that BS. This pathway is about people who suffer from Stockholm Syndrome and are acting under the control of the controller, said Manovitz. In a hostage or domestic situation or a work situation, the same person can be a good controller or a bad controller. The person being controlled wants to stay out of trouble and not have the bad part of the controller emerge. It psychologically forces you to try and see the world through the eyes of the distorted world of the good version of the controller to give you a sense of hope. And again, I don't mean to harp on it, but we see that with Nadia Marcinkova. She has all of the telltale signs of Stockholm Syndrome. And if she would come forward right now and step to the plate and help authorities, then she could, maybe give herself a little bit of a different light here, right? At least somebody who is searching for redemption. And then, on the flip side, she could expect to receive a little bit of a lighter charge, a little bit of a lighter sentence than the other core four conspirators. But her staying quiet, her not coming forward, what it does is it puts her squarely on the side of the core four, and therefore, as somebody, if I was prosecuting this case, I would not give her leniency. Everything is contingent on her coming forward and helping the case. You then try to attach yourself to that and detach yourself from the bad, he continued. You wind up on your toes to see the world through the eyes because of this attachment. One almost becomes brainwashed in wanting to keep them happy. Then, look, that's all of the core four girls as far as brainwashed to keep Jeffrey Epstein happy. And, the other three, in my opinion, went in with their eyes wide open. And it was more of a financial agreement that turned into a Kool-Aid drinking situation where they looked at Jeffrey Epstein as some god. But going into it, the three, Groff, Ross, and Kellen, they knew exactly what they were getting into. So, don't get me wrong. Once they were in his orbit, I'm sure that he groomed them, all three of them, and molded them into what he wanted. But at any time, these women could have stepped away from Epstein, gave up those salaries, and went to the authorities. But all of them chose to stay quiet, and all of them chose to plead the fifth when they were called upon to get justice moving in the right direction. All of these psychological understandings do not forgive heinous behavior and crimes, Manovitz stressed. And I've said that too. There's no excuse. There's no getting out of what you have done. Not even for Nadia Marcinkova. Maybe a lesser of a sentence than the other gals, but you're not going to use this as a shield to avoid prosecution. According to the new federal indictment unsealed Monday, Epstein created a vast network of underage victims for him to sexually exploit by conspiring with employees, associates, and others to run what was essentially a sex trafficking enterprise between 2002 and 2005. We know it was much longer than that as well, right? We know that it goes all the way back to the 90s, and we know that it went all the way up until his second arrest. So we understand that this isn't just, a 3-year deal where Epstein was trying to be smooth. We know that this is a decades-long operation that spanned continents. It appeared that some of those associates included a group of 4 women who were granted immunity in a controversial plea deal made by then prosecutor and current Secretary of Labor, Alexander Acosta. Epstein worked in concert with others to obtain minors not only for his sexual gratification, but also for the sexual gratification of others, according to a line from the court order. And that's significant, right? So it's stating right here in the court order that it wasn't only Epstein who was involved in this. In the court order itself, it's telling you this was a criminal conspiracy, a criminal enterprise, and all of these people took part in the ritualistic abuse of these girls. So how is this not a RICO case? How aren't these people slammed in the slammer? It's baffling, folks, isn't it? The women who were granted immunity include a former Epstein assistant, Sarah Kellen, who allegedly kept a Rolodex of young women to recruit for trysts with Epstein. She has since married NASCAR race car driver Brian Vickers and started her own interior design firm called SLK Designs. A recent article by the Daily Beast refers to public records showing that Kellen once operated SLK from a Midtown Manhattan building owned by Epstein's brother. Now, if you haven't listened to the Core 4 series yet, make sure you pop back on there. Episode 2 is all about Sarah Kellen Vickers. Adriana Ross, a former model from Poland who was hired by Epstein in 2002 to work at his Florida mansion and allegedly helped set up sex sessions for the billionaire. Pedophile. She was questioned in 2010 regarding any participation by Prince Andrew and the trafficking ring set up by Epstein. She had no answers to give. Leslie Groff, another former assistant who allegedly coordinated travel arrangements with young girls and scheduled massage sessions for her boss. Nadia Marcinkova, one of Epstein's alleged sex slaves who allegedly participated in his trysts with underage girls. She is now a commercial pilot certified by the FAA and is a social media influencer who goes by the name Global Girl. Well, you could definitely, if like with the Sarah Kellen Vickers, I mean, if you're interested in learning more about Nadia Marcinkova, make sure you check out that Core 4 series where we delve deep into who all of these girls are. Manovitz did not speculate as to what may have motivated these women to be complicit in Epstein's sex trafficking ring, but he said that many people, if they feel trapped or forced to stay in line by a controlling figure in their lives, comply as a way to cope with a dire situation thrust upon them. I guess that can occur, right? But when it comes to this case, these gals all came into this with eyes wide open. They all knew what they were up to, in my opinion. There's no excuse for what they did. There's no psychological shield for what they did. These were grown adults who entered into this with eyes wide open and of their own willingness to be a part of this out of greed or whatever the motivation was. Not named in the plea deal, but also alleged to have been complicit in helping to operate Epstein's ring, is former girlfriend and longtime confidant and co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell. In a 2015 report, Virginia Roberts filed a legal complaint in the state of Florida in which she accused Maxwell of being Epstein's madam, according to an article by The Guardian at the time. In the complaint, in which Roberts was originally listed as Jane Doe Number 3, it was alleged that Roberts was approached in 1999 by Maxwell when she was just 15 and was pursued to sleep with Epstein. Roberts also alleges in the suit that she was used as a sex slave for nearly 3 years. And remember, this is an older article, and we've seen all of the evidence from Virginia Roberts, right? We know that everything that she has talked about has been legit and up front. So it's important that we make sure that we continue to chase down the things that she's talked about and not forget players like Marvin Minsky and other people who might be sliding under the radar, right? Because at the end of the day, none of these people should ever feel safe if they were involved in this. In December of last year, the New York Post reported that a separate lawsuit was brought against Epstein in Manhattan, in which the plaintiff, Sarah Ransom, claimed that both he and Maxwell coerced her into having sex while she was in her 20s. And again, look, we talk a lot about the underage aspect of this case, but I don't care how old these girls were or these women were. If they were assaulted by Epstein and Maxwell, then they're part of this case. They need to be taken care of as well, and they need justice as well. It doesn't matter if it was just, if they were 25 or 45. Who cares? Epstein and Maxwell were serial abusers, and what they did to people that came into their atmosphere is utterly repugnant. And the fact that it was allowed to go on for so long is almost as gross as the actual act itself. As recently as last April, a New Jersey woman came forward in a sworn affidavit with accusations of her own against Epstein and Maxwell, according to the Miami Herald. Maxwell, 57, is the daughter of Robert Maxwell, a disgraced publishing mogul who was accused of theft from his company's pension funds to prevent bankruptcy. Boy, she comes from great stock, huh? Great stock. And also, that just goes to show you what I was talking about with the money laundering aspect, right? Her dad was a prolific money launderer. Her dad was an embezzler. You really think that didn't trickle down to old daughter oh dear of mine? She was on daddy's knee learning all of the tricks of the trade. All of the tricks of the trade from the cloak and dagger operations that her dad was part of. This wasn't just a sex trafficking ring, in my opinion. This was a money laundering operation as well. The former owner of the New York Daily News was found dead near the Canary Islands in the waters off the Atlantic Ocean just days after he was reported missing from his yacht, the Lady Ghislaine, named after his daughter. Maxwell was born and raised in England and immigrated to America in 1991 after her father's death, becoming a fixture in New York City's social scene. Maxwell has been photographed over the years hobnobbing with Prince Andrew, the Clintons, and Donald Trump. Yeah, look, there's no doubt about it. She was the gateway. She was the gateway into the world of the socialites, into the world of the polite society of New York, the same way Brockman was the gateway for Epstein to get his foot in the door with the scientists. The Oxford-educated Maxwell was the youngest of 9 children of Robert Maxwell and his wife, Dr. Elizabeth Betty Maxwell. a French-born researcher who authored 2 books on the Holocaust and was also a descendant of the Huguenot aristocracy. Oh, it makes sense, huh? Makes sense. So we got a little bit of the inbreeding for Ghislaine Maxwell, along with her just plain old stupidity, huh? Yeah, it makes a lot of sense now. You could see the inbreeding taking its toll. During her time in college during the late 80s, Maxwell started the Kit Kat Club, a speaker and discussion club for women in her native England. In 2012, Maxwell founded the Terramar Project, a nonprofit group focused on protecting oceans, and even gave a TED Talk on protecting the oceans. The TED Talk shit is nonsense as well. You know what? These people are all one big group of sick, disgusting bastards. Anytime you see one of these people getting up on top of their ivory tower and speaking down to you, remember, they all hung out with Ghislaine Maxwell. They all hung out with Jeffrey Epstein. They all knew the deal. All right, so next time one of these idiots gets on their ivory tower and attempts to speak down to you and attempts to tell you how you should see the world, just remember who they hobnob with. According to a 2002 profile of Epstein in New York Magazine, she was described as someone with a high-octane social life that helped boost his profile among New York's high society. Right there in the article, it tells you what I've been telling you for months, okay? Ghislaine Maxwell was the vehicle that got Epstein into the higher society of New York. And once there, he was like a bull in a china shop. Maxwell only dated Epstein for a brief period, but they remained friends for years after. Not friends, stop it. Business associates, co-conspirators, both being run as assets by insert your favorite intelligence agency here. It's a mysterious relationship that they have, journalist David Patrick Columbia said in the New York Magazine interview. In one way, they are soulmates, yet they are hardly companions anymore. It's a nice conventional relationship where they serve each other's purposes. Boy, how telling is that statement? That is exactly what they do. They're like they're like parasites, right? Leeching off of each other with their symbiotic relationship. And there was no love there, at least from Epstein. Ghislaine might have, had some flutters in her heart for Epstein, but Epstein was a cold-hearted, mass serial pervert who had love for nobody in his heart. And I wouldn't even say Ghislaine had love for Jeffrey Epstein. She was enamored with Epstein. She respected the way he conducted himself. She respected his deviousness and how evil he was. Because within him, she found a kindred soul, right? Somebody that was just like her. Somebody else that was hiding in the shadows. And once they came together, they formed the brain trust of the most heinous, disgusting, evil, human trafficking ring of our time. And the saddest part, folks, people in power knew what was going on. People in power were protecting them. And this isn't a conspiracy at this point. These are just facts, okay? These are just facts. And it's sad that in the year 2020, 12 years after this man's first arrest, and decades after he started his crime spree, there has still not been one single arrest of Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirators. Still, no answers from the DA, no answers from the SDNY. All we have are 2 lowly jailhouse guards who are being brought up on criminal charges in this case. Now, how does that pass any smell test? How is that even acceptable, even barely acceptable, anywhere on this planet? Considering all the evidence that is out there for these co-conspirators to be rounded up, how is it possible that only 2 lowly jail guards are in jail right now? What's the deal, folks? Right? What is the deal? Where are the authorities? And why have they not done their jobs yet? All right, folks, if you'd like to contact me, you could do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI at protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. In the description box, you'll find the link for my newest podcast as well. COVID-19, the pandemic that changed everything. All right, everybody, I will talk to you later on with the Daily Drop. I hope you all have a fantastic afternoon.